Hello everybody, a very good morning. It is 7 o'clock here in the United Kingdom. You are very welcome to join us for breakfast here on Sky News, wherever you're watching us around the world. Today we are at COP26 again for day 2 of the discussions here. The World Summit, 120 leaders are here. Start with some good news for you this morning. They have struck a deal to stop destruction of the world's forests within a decade. We'll have more on that. Also, the Queen has been speaking directly to the delegates. She says, I might not be here, but I'm keeping a wary eye on you lot. In addition to that, we've got the Environment Secretary on the programme this morning and indeed his Labour counterpart. And once again, we're taking you right around the world.
I'm in Delhi as India ignores the international deadline to reach net zero, setting its target for 2070.
Here in the Maldives, there are plans to turn an island of rubbish from an environmental hazard into a sustainable waste site as they battle against climate change that threatens their very way of life.
China may be the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, but President Xi Jinping has said that developed nations need to do more to support other countries help prevent climate change.
The campaign to suspend the rollout of smart motorways that use the hard shoulder as a live lane. And I'm live in Jersey as France backs down on its threat to ban British vessels from French ports for now.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's being hailed as a significant milestone to help tackle the climate crisis. News this morning of an agreement by more than 100 countries, including Brazil and also Russia, to stop and reverse deforestation by 2030. But a warning to leaders from the Queen, who told them that they must rise above the politics, in her words, of the moment to save the planet. We'll have more on that coming up in just a few moments time. Throughout today's show, we're going to be talking to our climate specialists around the globe. Neville Lazarus is in Delhi for us after that shock to 2070 target from India. Tom Cheshire is live in the coal region of Datong in China. And also Ashish Joshi is in the Maldives, which could end up underwater if temperatures continue to rise. First, though, our main report from Rhiannon Mills on the deal to stop deforestation and a message from the Queen.
She is the only one who can deliver a message like this. The Queen telling other world leaders they must act now and not for their own sakes.
Of course, the benefits of such actions will not be there to enjoy for all of us here today. None of us will live forever. But we are doing this not for ourselves, but for our children and our children's children, and those who will follow in their footsteps.
There was an added poignancy because of the recent worries about the Queen's health, which meant her family had to support the Prime Minister in welcoming leaders to Glasgow, as the monarch, via video message, asked them to put their differences to one side.
I, for one, hope that this conference will be one of those rare occasions where everyone will have the chance to rise above the politics of the moment and achieve true statesmanship.
Her message praising Prince Philip's commitment to conservation and Prince Charles and Prince William's environmental work came as her Prime Minister prepared to announce the first major deal of COP26. With more than 100 leaders committing to end deforestation by 2030, from Canada and Russia to Colombia, Indonesia and Brazil. A pledge which will restore degraded land, tackle wildfires and support indigenous communities, backed by almost £14 billion in funding. Forests absorb around 1/3 of the global CO2 released from burning fossil fuels every year. But an area of forest the size of 27 football pitches is lost every minute.
Brazil's greenhouse gas emissions increased in 9.5% last year during the pandemic, which is odd And Brazil was one of the only countries in the world that saw that increased because the economy stopped, right, during the pandemic. And that was due to deforestation.
With some at COP26 already not going far enough on their climate commitments, the announcement on forests will at least be seen as one positive as the world leaders meet for another day. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News in Glasgow.
We're joined now from Westminster by the Environment Secretary, George Eustace. Mr Eustace, thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Why are you not here?
Well, I will be there later in this week, and there's a day that's focused on nature that's taking place on Saturday, but we're kind of sharing the agenda between us over the next couple of weeks, and obviously the Prime Minister's been opening the event.
Are you flying up or coming by train?
I'll be coming by train.
Good to hear it. Talk to me about this new deal.
Well, this is a really significant breakthrough because we've now got over 100 countries covering around 85% of the forests around the world committed to ending the net loss of forests by 2030. And it includes key countries like Russia, which has got a huge area of forest, and obviously Canada as well, but also some of the Central African countries responsible for the Congo, and Brazil, which, you know, would surprise some people, but Brazil has been really actively engaged in this agenda. And underpinning that, we've also mobilised quite a lot of finance from countries to support projects to halt the loss of forests and to establish new forests. And that's around £9 billion of commitments from governments and a further £5 billion from private commitments.
OK. You mentioned the Brazilian president. Of course, he's not here. You can take his word for it that he's going to abide by these rules, because, of course, we've found ourselves in this position with him before, and he's reneged on the deal.
Well, they haven't made any commitments like this before. And, you know, we've worked very hard with Brazil and with many other countries over the last year to get agreement for this. I think things are starting to change in Brazil in terms of their approach. And look, always with these issues, with these multilateral agreements, you've got to work with countries. You know, we can only deliver these changes if we can carry countries, you know, like Brazil and like others around the world with us. It needs the whole world to come together and make these commitments, and you've got to really work constructively with countries like Brazil and with others, and that's what we've been doing, and I think it's yielded some success. The last big attempt at doing something like this was in 2014 with the New York Declaration. That only had about 40 countries, and it didn't have any of the major countries with forests, so this is a major step forward.
OK. We've heard from the Indian government. They are aiming for net zero by 2070, is what they told us last night. That's not good enough, is it?
Well, obviously, we would prefer it if all countries committed to do net zero earlier. We've committed to 2050. We would hope to, but we should also, you know, welcome this as a big step forward. India hadn't previously committed to net zero. They have got, you know, more to do to get there, and you know, we should welcome what they've committed to, even though we would obviously always hope that people would commit to do it earlier.
But when people are coming up with these numbers, they're almost telephone numbers, aren't they? 2070, who's around now that will be able to hold them to task and saying, back in 2021, 50 years ago, you told us that you'd be reaching these targets and you haven't?
Well, there'll be staging posts along the way, and so the other big focus of this conference, you'll hear a lot about it, people talking about the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, and that is the commitments that each country makes to reduce their carbon emissions by 2030. And obviously in the UK, we've got a series of carbon budgets, another one in 2035, as staging posts towards net zero, and that applies to all countries. So while there's a long-term target to get to net zero, there are many staging posts between now and then, and countries around the world will be needing to take policy decisions right now in order to hit those staging posts and to maintain their trajectory to net zero.
OK, so some hope for optimism. We'll be hearing from the President of India and our Prime Minister within our programme later on today. But, you know, it has to be said, 2070 from India. Three of the main nations that we wanted here, China, Russia, Brazil, are not here. We've heard from the Prime Minister. He's not particularly optimistic. We heard from your colleague, the Foreign Secretary, yesterday. She says it's touch and go, what we'll get out of COP26. How confident are you, as a percentage, that we'll get a deal?
Well, look, these events are always complex. You've got multilateral negotiations going on. They will come up with an agreement on the final day, on the 12th of November, and there's usually lots of discussion that goes late into the night. But look, what I would say is a week ago I was apprehensive about the area I've been working on, this commitment on forests. We didn't have it in the bag. We weren't sure whether countries would come together. But I think it's a really encouraging sign that this early on, ahead of this forest event today, actually, many of those countries have come forward and said, you know what, we're up for doing this. And that's a big breakthrough. And I'm delighted with what we've achieved today on this. And, you know, if this continues, then it will bode well for the rest of COP over the next couple of weeks.
You're sounding much more confident than your colleagues.
Well, I think this is an important breakthrough. Had you spoken to me, 5 days ago, I also would have been apprehensive about whether we would have landed this agreement on forests. But we have, and, it's looking really encouraging now today. This is a big breakthrough. As I said, not only have we got countries responsible for 85% of the world's forests committed to this pledge, we've also got 28 countries that are the big consumers of forest risk products, things like palm oil, committed to more sustainability in supply chains. And crucially, we've mobilised a lot of finance to support this commitment. So this is a really significant breakthrough.
OK, so talking about deals, the French, what have we done there? The papers this morning saying le back down as far as French fishing is concerned. Have the Brits won that argument?
Well, we welcome, obviously, the fact that France has stepped back from the threats that they were making last Wednesday. I mean, we had an agreement on fisheries that we all concluded at the end of last year. We've been implementing that in good faith. There's now around 1,700 EU vessels that have been licensed to fish in our waters, around 750 of them French. There's a small number of vessels, around 55, that wanted access to Jersey waters but haven't yet been able to demonstrate that they previously accessed that during what's called the reference period. We've always been clear that we're open to further dialogue on that, and that if there's new evidence that can be brought to bear, then obviously we would consider that. We want to license any vessel that qualifies under the terms of the agreement we reached a year ago. But obviously we really welcome the fact that France has stepped back from what they threatened, and there's going to be further discussions on Thursday.
So it's a back down by the French?
Well, look, it's a decision by the French to step back from the threats that they made last Wednesday. We welcome that. But, for our part, though, we've always said we want to de-escalate this, and we've always said that we have an ever-open door to discuss any further evidence that France or the EU might have on any additional vessels they'd like to have licensed.
So you're confident that fishing wars has gone away now?
Well, it has, in the sense that France has clearly been taking a decision not to implement some of the measures that they threatened last Wednesday. We very much welcome that. But I think there's going to be a really important meeting on Thursday between Lord Frost and his opposite number, not just on fisheries, but on a wider range of issues as well. It's really important for us to have good relations with our nearest neighbour and a close ally. And so we welcome the decision that the French have taken.
And that impounded fishing vessel, that's been returned, has it?
Yes, I understand that vessel has now been released. I think there's going to need to be some further discussions. There clearly was an administrative error at some point. We haven't quite got to the bottom of that, but yes, that vessel, I understand, has been released. OK, good news for the skipper and the crew. While I've got you, we were talking about COP, and also I wanted to bring in Brexit, if I may, because a couple of months ago, maybe only 6 weeks ago, you were on the show and you said that President Biden didn't understand the full complexities of the Northern Ireland Protocol. He's here at the summit. What's your message to him today? Do you think he understands it a little better now? Well, look, the point that I was making is that in the context of the Northern Ireland Protocol, Nobody believes in the Good Friday Agreement more than the UK government. We're a signatory to it. We absolutely stand behind peace in Northern Ireland and all the provisions of that agreement. But part of the Good Friday Agreement also require you to be recognising the importance of Northern Ireland being in the UK and that sort of what's called the East-West dimension to it as well. That was the point that I was making, and that is why Lord Frost is also trying to basically have a discussion with the European Union about how we should approach and implement the Northern Ireland Protocol so that it works in a way that's consistent with the Good Friday Agreement.
So, which bit of the Northern Ireland Protocol did you think the President didn't understand?
I think, from memory, it was, I think you put it to me that the United States felt that by the changes we were proposing were somehow at odds with the Good Friday Agreement, which is simply untrue. They were entirely actually consistent with the Good Friday Agreement. And in fact, the reason we need to try to change the way we approach the Northern Ireland Protocol is that as it's being currently interpreted, it's not really working for the Good Friday Agreement.
OK, so it was me that was misunderstanding as opposed to the President.
Well, I think you were putting to me, Kay, if I recall, reports in the press about what the US administration might have thought.
OK, I'm not going to.
OK.
As far as President Biden is concerned, you think that he does understand the Northern Ireland Protocol. You think that he's on board as far as Brexit is concerned. And despite him saying over the weekend that his closest allies in Europe are the French, we can still do business with him. And although we haven't got any deals with the Americans as yet, as far as trade is concerned, that's very much on the agenda while the two leaders are here.
Well, look, I've not spoken to President Biden about the Good Friday Agreement, so this is something obviously that I'm sure the Prime Minister does, as well as talk to him about what we're trying to achieve with the Northern Ireland Protocol, so that it is consistent with the Good Friday Agreement. I'm not even sure if that's on the agenda. Obviously, this week everybody's very, very much focused on getting the right kind of agreement on climate change. The US has substantially increased its commitment to international climate finance, and it's also been a really important ally on some of the work we're doing, not just on forests, but also on oceans as well. So we really welcome the role that they're playing at this conference.
OK, just before I let you go, obviously it's a green conference here. We're doing our best to try and cut fossil fuel emissions. What are the big things that you do at home to try to save the planet?
Well, look, like everybody, try to pay attention to the dividing of waste and making sure that we recycle as much as possible. As I said earlier, I'm going to be going to COP by train, and whenever I travel to the constituency, I generally do so by train. There's all of us have got things that we can do. But crucially, in order to hit these targets, there's going to be a big role for technology, new technologies coming forward that are more sustainable, that do wean us off our dependence on fossil fuels, and getting those technologies deployed is going to be the single most important thing we can do.
Have you got an electric vehicle?
I don't have an electric vehicle. I've got a small mini that's got a green mode on it, but I don't yet have an electric vehicle. But obviously, after 2030, we're saying that all new vehicles should be electric, and soon thereafter, of course, people will still be able to buy petrol and diesel vehicles second-hand. But we are on a trajectory to phase those out over the next 10 years to 20 years.
And have you got a heat pump?
No, I don't have a heat pump at the moment, but it's certainly something that I would look at. Obviously, we're trying to encourage all of these technologies. But look, as I mentioned, I'm the same as many other people, that we all want to do the right thing and make these changes. We need the technology to come forward. We need to set a trajectory. Everybody wants to make these changes. Sometimes the technology is not quite there yet, but we are making progress in the right direction.
Good to talk to you. Hopefully we'll see you later on in the week. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. And just a reminder, if you want to catch up on any of that interview, or indeed you can watch it if you would like to, the rest of the programme when you're out and about this morning. You can find us on the mobile app, or go to our website and go into our live blog to watch the programme live. And you can catch up as well on the interviews on my Twitter. That's at Kay Burley. Now, throughout today's show, we are going to be talking to our climate specialists around the globe for you. And Neville Lazarus is in Delhi after that shock 27 target from India. Tom Cheshire is live in the coal region of Datong in China. And Ashish Joshi is in the Maldives, which could end up underwater if temperatures continue to rise. Let's go first this morning to Ashish Joshi in the Maldives. Hello to you, Ashish. What's the latest from the Maldives today?
Well, it's a recognition from the Maldivian government that it needs to do as much as it can to protect its own nation. We visited an island of waste, a notorious island of waste that has been smouldering and smoking and burning for 30 years, belching toxic fumes into the atmosphere. And if you think about the archipelago and you think about the geography, where does an island of hundreds and hundreds of atolls throw its waste? It can't throw it into the ocean. There are 400,000 people who call the Maldives their home, and up to 1 million tourists a year, all bringing with them their own rubbish. What used to happen, Kay, is all of this rubbish was collected and dumped on an island known as Thilafushi, known to locals as Trash Island. But now they recognise that burning all of this waste, and it wasn't even sorted. So all of this waste collected together, set on fire, and that fire raged for 30 years. It's only just been extinguished because the Maldivian government recognising that it has to contribute as much as it can towards protecting its own environment. And now what they'll do is they'll transform this island into a sustainable green energy plant, taking all of that waste and having a closed incinerator, burning that waste to produce green energy which can be used in the islands. But there is also a recognition that whatever they do here is interdependent on what the rest of the world does. So there is a delegation from the Maldives which has travelled to COP26. They spoke to me before they left. They say, we only have the one voice. We'll do everything we can to make sure it's heard.
Neville Lazarus is in Delhi for us this morning. Neville, good morning.
Morning, Kay. Well, we've had a lot of news about India setting its target for 2070 of net zero. There's a bit of cheer out here from government organisation, but a lot of scepticism from climate activists and scientists. How India was going to reach that target is going to be an uphill task, because India relies a lot on coal. Over 70% of India's grid is powered by coal. More than 50% of the GDP is solely comes from fossil fuel and coal energy, and this is going to be an uphill task for India to balance that economic development and also climate change. Though India has set itself for a 2070 net zero, according to Sky News data teams, in recent years the country has become the world's largest emitter of sulfur dioxide, which has been linked to millions of deaths. This graphic from NASA shows that while China's sulfur dioxide emissions have fallen, India has sharply risen. Sulfur dioxide contributes to air pollution, which causes acid rain and environmental damage. Now, India is on the front line of climate change. Over the last few years, we have seen an increase in cyclones, flooding, heat waves and droughts, and their intensity rising even more than the previous years, affecting the lives and livelihoods of millions of people. And India will have to make that fine balance between economic development and climate change. Okay?
OK, thanks very much. Let's bring in Tom Cheshire, should we? He's in Shaanxi province in China for us this morning. Tom, we've been talking a lot about the fact that the Chinese president is not here. Tell us the latest from China this morning.
Yeah, he's certainly not a cop. He's still here in China. What he did do yesterday was submit basically a note. It wasn't even a video address, uploaded to the website, published on the website, putting forward China's point of view. What they've been doing over the last year is really battening down the hatches in every sort of geopolitical field. It feels the same way with climate change. We got no new climate pledges before COP. We were hoping for some. We're certainly not expecting any in his note, and we didn't get any of them. Instead, it was looking at developed countries to try and help other nations. China classes itself as a developing nation, and saying that what's more important than words is deeds. And that might be, again, rather sort of self-aggrandizing to say you don't even have to be at COP. It's about what you do at home that's important. And that is the case to some extent. Even though there have been no new pledges from China, what we have seen is at least a doubling down on the commitments that's already made last year, trying to entrench it in the bureaucracy, trying to turn around a juggernaut economy that's been built on dirty growth. But it isn't an easy transition to make. I'm here in Datong, as you mentioned. This is coal country, but I'm actually in the old town right now, and they're trying to redevelop it, turn it into a tourist attraction. But they can't really get away from coal for now. Just a few hours drive from here, there are lots of coal plants still being put up. We visited 3, and between them they represent more than the entire coal output of the UK. Those are under construction, and that's not China slipping on its goals. Those are the goals. China has pledged to build more coal power until 2025. So that might seem all fairly depressing, but I think there is still some hope for COP26, even without Xi Jinping being there. His climate envoy, Xie Zhenhua, is empowered to sort of talk to people. It might even be easier because there's not the sense of losing face to foreigners. And then other countries could perhaps put China, when it comes to reducing coal emissions, to do it more quickly than they've promised. But it won't be Xi Jinping in the room himself making those commitments.
OK, Tom in China, Neville in India, and also Ashish in the Maldives. Thank you all very much for the updates. We are live in Glasgow at COP26 for day 2 of the summit. A lot more hope this morning from the Environment Secretary. Ashna's here. What do you think?
I thought him saying that he was apprehensive at first, maybe a few days ago, ahead of that announcement when it comes to deforestation and, looking at encouraging more of those rainforests to flourish, I suppose. They are described as the lungs of the planet, taking up and soaking up tons of carbon. But him now saying that he described this as being a big breakthrough. The UK government has pledged some £1.5 billion, and globally they've agreed to some £19 billion being pumped into rainforests, and that's going to be beneficial to rainforests like Brazil, Amazon, where Mark Austin is, but also Indonesia, and Canada too, and Norway. So lots of these countries are going to be benefiting from this huge amount of money. But that is a pledge, of course, that they're wanting us to focus on. But still, we've got those reminders of yesterday. We were hoping for that big breakthrough from India. We got it in some form, but meh. 2070 is a long, long time. I mean, 5 decades away from now.
I'll be 60 by then.
It's a long, long time away. It's a long time away.
We're going to hear from the Indian Prime Minister later on, aren't we?
We are. It'll be interesting to hear from him whether there is any movement on that. I think it's probably likely that in his meeting yesterday with the Prime Minister, he probably, was hoping for that big headline-stealing moment. Come on now, Boris saying probably, come on now, Modi, let's see if we can get you to be on the front pages. But they're suddenly on the front pages for not all the right reasons. 2070 is such a long time away, but we have to remember they are a developing nation and they're not going to be able to switch to a green economy or with that green infrastructure as quickly as some of those other developing nations. This is a country with a huge amount of poverty. So then even saying they've got some form of a target is good, but they have made that carbon emission target in 2030, so that is positive.
OK, thank you for being kind about my age. We'll see you in about half an hour or so. Thanks very much indeed, Ashna. Thank you. Here's a look at climate change as it is happening. You can see on the dashboard that we've got, here we go, the estimated temperature change compared to pre-industrial levels. This is now above 1.2 degrees. Under that is the estimated total carbon dioxide emissions. Most of this comes, we're told, from burning fossil fuels and continues to rise, feeding that temperature change. And then you can see on the right the real-time power mix. This data comes from the national grid and illustrates the sources of our electricity. You can't see that just at the moment. A slight glitch on our screen. We'll sort that out for you, and of course we'll update it a little bit later on in the programme. And as world leaders gather at COP26, we take a look at the impact climate change is having right around the world. That's in a special programme on Sky News tonight at 7 p.m. Still to come on the programme for you, the Chinese president, talking a lot about him, haven't we, over the last few days. He isn't coming to Glasgow. 7:30, we'll try and find out what he is doing at home to prevent climate change. What is Manchester doing to prevent climate change? We'll be joined by the city's mayor, that's Andy Burnham, of course. He's joining us at 7:45. And then after 8 o'clock, we'll ask the Shadow Environment Secretary, Luke Pollard, talking to him in more detail about whether Labour believes the government will get a global agreement after the first day of the Glasgow summit. There are calls to suspend the rollout of smart motorways, which use the hard shoulder as live lanes because of safety concerns. Talking about that in more detail with Katie Barnfield. She is by the M1 for us this morning, near Bletchley. Hello to you, Katie. Tell us more about the story.
Well, good morning, Kay. Yes, as you say, the Transport Committee have now called for the building of all new smart motorways to be suspended until safety concerns are addressed. And they say the problem is there is simply not enough data yet, not enough safety data to prove that they are safe and therefore justify continuing with the project. Now, as you say, what they have a particular problem with is a type of smart motorway called all-lane running motorways. Now, the government has committed to make all new smart motorways this type of motorway, which use the hard shoulder as a live lane at all times. But there are concerns over safety because of the number of fatal accidents that have happened where a car has been stopped in a live lane and another car has come along behind it and crashed into it. Now, the committee say they want safety measures to be introduced that they asked for 5 years ago already. Things like more refuge areas for broken down cars on this type of motorway, and also an independent commission to be introduced to review the safety of smart motorways before going forward. Now, the government has responded this morning. They say they are going to look at the recommendations of the Transport Committee in a lot of detail.
OK, thank you, Katie. We're going to discuss that report with Claire Mercer, who founded the Smart Motorways Kill campaign after her husband was killed in a smart motorway accident. That's after 8 o'clock this morning. Before that, though, let's talk about France. They appear to have stepped back for now from the threat to ban British vessels, fishing vessels, from French ports, and other vessels as well, of course. The Environment Secretary telling us just now he welcomes the fact that the French have backed down.
I'm not remotely happy about what has happened, as you can hear me say. I want to see this situation resolved. These threats are unwarranted, and they're not the actions we would expect of a friend and ally of the United Kingdom.
Becky Johnson joining us now on Jersey this morning. Hello to you, Becky. So there was concerns from the government ministers on Jersey yesterday. What are they saying this morning?
Yeah, good morning, Kay. Well, relief here in Jersey. We're out here in the harbour. Fisherman Mark taking us out this morning, and the fishing communities here in Jersey and in the UK have had something of a reprieve, really, with this the threat of French ports being closed to them, delayed as talks continue. There had been fears among these fishing communities that those ports were closed to fishermen from Jersey and the UK from midnight last night, but then President Macron said that he felt talks should continue. So talks between the two sides are continuing today. The delay by President Macron in imposing what he'd threatened, which also included more checks on lorries coming in from the UK to France, has been welcomed by the UK government, the decision to continue talking rather than imposing those extra checks and blocking ports. And we understand Brexit Minister Lord Frost is going to be talking with French officials on Thursday about a number of Brexit issues issues, so potentially no action until at the earliest after those talks. So the threat of the closure of French ports, of course, for the fishermen here in Jersey, the vast majority of their fish is sold in Europe and goes in via France, so that would be a huge blow and potentially threaten the livelihoods of the fishermen here. That threat has been delayed, but it hasn't yet gone away. Of course, all of this began when in September the UK and Jersey didn't give permits to a number of French fishermen to fish in waters around here. So it's whether which side is going to back down, really, and that's what the fishermen here are thinking. Mark, just a quick word from you. How are people feeling today? Do you feel the threat's gone away?
I don't think it's not going to go away until one of them back down.
And that's what people are saying. They think it's really going to be who blinks first. Is it going to be the UK? Is it going to be France? But for now, as I say, a reprieve as we head out on this beautiful morning for a bit of fishing.
Looks a bit choppy, though, where you are, Becky. How is it?
Not half as choppy as it was yesterday, Kay, when we were out on the water. In fact, it's been really windy for the last few days, and the fishermen haven't been able to properly go out for the last few days. So a lot calmer than it was yesterday, that's for sure. OK, lovely. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Well, the Environment Secretary, we've been talking to him this morning. He says that he is hopeful of a final deal on greenhouse gas emissions and that they can be agreed at the COP26 summit here in Glasgow. This morning, there's an agreement by more than 100 different countries, including Brazil and Russia, to stop and reverse deforestation by 2030. Earlier, George Eustace told us he was increasingly optimistic an agreement would be reached.
A week ago, I was apprehensive about the area I've been working on, this commitment on forests. We didn't have it in the bag. We weren't sure whether countries would come together. But I think it's a really encouraging sign that this early on, ahead of this forest event today, actually many of those countries have come forward and said, you know what, we're up for doing this. And that's a big breakthrough. And I'm delighted with what we've achieved today on this.
Tamara's with us. Hi, Tamara. Sounding pretty optimistic.
Hi, Kay. Yes, today is the last day the world leaders will be there, and I think Boris Johnson will be very much trumpeting this achievement. 100 countries at the summit have signed up to a pledge to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. Now, the last time countries signed up to this in 2014 at a previous climate summit, you only got 40 countries, and they didn't include Brazil or China, which have a lot of the world's forests. So this is, the government feel, a very significant achievement. George Eustace called it an important breakthrough that all these countries had signed up to it. And it will, they say, make a real difference to cutting carbon emissions, because here's a staggering statistic for you. The equivalent of 27 football pitches of forest is lost every single minute at the moment, and the speed of the deforestation of the Amazon in Brazil is really escalating all the time. So this is going to be crucial. So as well as the bigger deal to cut carbon emissions, these side deals on coal and on forests and on electric cars are really where the British government is looking to make significant progress. So they'll be really pleased with this today. But look, it's not legally binding, and the monitoring of it is going to be crucial, because of course a lot of people make their living out of logging forests, and how this is going to be overseen is obviously a big question. But diplomatically, it is an achievement that the British government will be really pleased with on this key important day of the conference, when world leaders are all there. They're all going to be going home tonight so that the whole process of negotiating can begin in earnest tomorrow.
OK, thank you. Now, tens of thousands of people are here in Glasgow for COP26, but the biggest and perhaps most important person, some might say, isn't in town. That is President Xi Jinping. He has stayed at home. So how is he doing at home to tackle the climate change? What is he doing at home to tackle the climate crisis? Joining us is Dr. Zizi Hu, Honorary Research Associate at the University of Oxford, joining us, as I said, live. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us. Is President of China making any real difference at home in China, even though he isn't here today?
Hi, Kay. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, so I think while appearing at COP is an important political statement, let's take a step back and think about the science of it, which is all about the commitments and the delivery of those commitments. So at home, China is pledging a carbon peak by 2030, which basically means that emissions will peak by 2030, and it is pledging carbon neutrality by 2060, which means carbon emissions that are emitted into the atmosphere will be balanced by emissions savings elsewhere. So it is really about these commitments that are being made right now.
Not been much change since 2015, has there? Do you think we'll see significant changes from China in the next decade?
The climate science community obviously hopes that there will be, significant changes. And I think the issue right now is that, unfortunately, China does face a lot of challenges in when it comes to green transition, and that's not unique to China. It's also a challenge for other countries. But yeah, we do know that the emissions reductions will need to happen. We need to take this very seriously, and it's an effort that the country will need to make.
Okay, we are hearing that China are planning net zero. Is it by 2060? That's a very long way away. I mean, it's better than India, 2070, but goodness me. Do we have that much time? This is an issue that highlights how important and what a challenge that the country faces, right? But I do think that the country will make significant progress on this issue, but we'll have to see what happens. But one of the things that I would like to highlight is that emissions reductions are extremely important. But that's not only half of the story or half of the battle, because the other half of the battle is really about adaptation, which we don't seem to talk about that much. It is about understanding how do we build our society, our economy, and our infrastructure systems to a resilient standard that they can withstand climate extremes. And that is unfortunately because we have locked ourselves in to a development path that actually, from historical emissions, even if we stop producing everything now, there are climate impacts that are going to happen. And we don't talk, enough, I think, about this issue of adaptation. So, how do we design hospitals, or how do we design road networks or power networks? If a flood event hits, do they have, backup generators? Do they have, protective measures in place so that we can, make sure that they still function? That is unfortunately not talked or discussed enough, I think. And what about the people of China? How do they react to climate change? Are they on board? Are they engaged from your experience?
From my own experience, it's been phenomenal, right? I think, if I talk about my family or friends, the issue of climate change wasn't really a thing, I would say, 10 years ago, but now it is very, very much like an engaged debate. If you watch the news in China, I haven't personally been back in 2 years, but I hear from my parents, my cousins and family members. They tell me, oh my gosh, you study climate change and we have floods and we have a lot of air pollution. What are we going to do? I do think there is a huge movement now in China in terms of the people's engagement and kind of literacy or understanding of climate issues, and it's definitely on people's minds.
OK, it's good to talk to you, and thanks for staying up for us in Boston, United States of America this morning. We very much appreciate it. Off to bed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. With us now is the Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham. Hiya.
Hi, Kate.
COP26, is it going to be a success?
It's hard to say, I think. I felt it was a bit nervy, a bit jittery yesterday, so it's in the balance, I would say. From my point of view, we're ready to go in Greater Manchester. We've got a plan to really move towards a zero carbon Greater Manchester by 2038, but we're not yet getting the full buy-in and backing that we need to get there. So, you know, it is doable. It's tough, but doable. We just need that full government partnership to get there.
You mean money?
I do, and, you know, I'm not just coming on to make cheap political points. There was money for us in the budget for public transport investment, £1 billion, which was great, but we don't yet have the money to decarbonise the bus fleet. So we're bidding for money for bus improvement, and we don't yet have that money. And, you know, the big thing I want to get over is, you know, until we do something on fares for public transport, we're not going to be in the right place. When it's cheaper to catch a plane than it is to catch a train, or it's cheaper for a couple of young people to get a taxi than it is to get a bus, as it is in Greater Manchester, we're just not going to be in the right place. So I would have much preferred to see the government saying, right, we're going to bring down rail fares, we're going to bring down bus fares, rather than lowering air fares in the recent budget.
What if you don't get the money?
Well, we won't be able to hit 2038. So what I've said to the government is, if you back us, not just on public transport, but on retrofitting people's homes to make them zero carbon, we can remove 1 million tonnes of carbon from the Greater Manchester economy by 2025. And I can do that. And the reason I can say that in the way that other mayors can't is because I've taken the decision to put buses back under public control after 35 years of deregulation. So finally, we will decide what buses are on our roads, not the bus operators. And for that reason, I can give them a guarantee that I can remove carbon from the Greater Manchester economy, but they do need to back me to do it.
Professor Kevin Anderson says Greater Manchester is currently falling short of its commitments. He is a Tundle Centre professor on climate change. So what, do you agree with him, and what are you going to do to try and fix it?
Well, yes, I don't think anyone is doing enough, to be honest, Kay. And the thing is, you know, this COP, there's a danger of it looking like lots of entitled and wealthy people have come to lecture everybody about their lives, and I can see that, and I can feel that. I think
and
the
that's
message.
What a lot of people feel who are watching at home.
I know it. I know.
They think, you know, posh people telling us what we should do, and I can't afford to feed the kids.
I know. I mean, you and I know what people in Wigan will be thinking about this, and I think the story's got to be turned round at this COP, because, to be honest with you, this is the route to a lower cost of living for people. So if I get my way in Greater Manchester, £1.50 a bus journey like it is in London, that will help a lot of people, and actually would be a real reason for them to leave the car at home. If we retrofit people's homes, their energy bills can come right down and become more stable.
How do we pay for that, though?
Well, that's where the government has to come in. You know, we won't get there without upfront costs, but the thing is, you can reduce the lifetime costs by putting in that upfront investment. So if you invest in an electric car, it's cheaper to run than a petrol or a diesel car. So therefore, the money is saved over the lifetime of that vehicle. So the government has to put in that upfront investment, but then it will be setting us up to hopefully reduce the cost of living for people. And I don't think that message is getting over at the moment. The drive to net zero could be the way to level up the country. It could be the route to better public transport, better homes for people, jobs for people, doing all of that work on people's homes. But I still feel we haven't quite, as a country, got our kind of message lined up properly on this.
You mentioned EVs, electric vehicles. I've learned to call them EVs while I've been here. There's nowhere to plug them in.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is...
the infrastructure, I don't know what it's like in Greater Manchester,
well, it's not good
but
enough.
One of our colleagues, Thomas Moore, went from Paris to Glasgow. He was struggling to find places to charge the car.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not good enough. And you quoted Professor Anderson, and rightly, you know, I need to be challenged, and we're not yet doing enough, any of us.
So what's it like in Greater Manchester?
So we have a number, and we have got a new partnership with an EV provider.
When you say a number, like as a percentage, how many fewer is it than you need?
No, we've got about 300 at the moment, but there's another 100 going in this year, another 200 going in next year. So we're expanding them. Well, I think it depends on how quickly people change their vehicles, doesn't it? So we don't have enough, and you need the really rapid charging points, because taxi drivers can't be hanging around all day waiting for their vehicle.
None of us can.
None of us can. So, you know, yes, this all needs changing. We've got a bike hire scheme that's launching this month. We are doing quite a lot, but we are unique because we're putting buses under public control. We are uniquely placed to create the country's first net zero public transport system. Why, Kay? Because our trams in Greater Manchester, the biggest tram system in the UK, one of the biggest in Europe, already runs on renewable energy. And that's a great story for us to be able to come here and shout about. But imagine If the buses were electrified as well, they were running on renewable energy. It was all one system where it was £1.50 a journey. That, I think, is when you're really getting in the game of helping people buy into this journey towards net zero. Because as you rightly said before, I think some of the public might be hearing some of this and watching some of this and starting to switch off a little bit.
Do you, to paraphrase one of your former leaders, do you feel the weight of history on your shoulder, given that the Northwest was the home of the Industrial Revolution and a lot of this carbon emission now is as a direct result of what we were doing in the 1880s?
Well, you can't help but look back at the history of Greater Manchester and you look at that first industrial revolution, and we did lead it. We led it as a region, we led it as a country. And obviously we've deindustrialised since then. And I think this is the opportunity that's staring us now right in the face. The drive to net zero could reindustrialise the north of England, but this time in a good way, where it's clean and we give people clean air to breathe. That's an opportunity that we've got as a country. You've got Steve Rotherham in Liverpool, the mayor, talking about a tidal barrier to heat all the homes in the Liverpool city region. We've got a green hydrogen cluster in Trafford.
What does that mean?
It's the cleanest form of hydrogen, and it will be a big energy source in the future, and it's coming through now as a new technology. Wind up in the northeast. The north of England could lead the next industrial revolution. It needs the government to back it. We've had a lot of rhetoric about them saying, we believe in the north, we're backing the north. The mayors aren't yet feeling it properly, to be honest with you, and that window to do something is kind of closing.
I'm not letting you off without telling me what you think about Keir Starmer's leadership at the moment.
Well, I thought the party did a very good response to the budget last week. I say the party because Keir obviously is isolating at the moment, but I thought Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, in difficult circumstances, did a terrific job. You know, that first line that she said that they've prioritised bankers sipping champagne on internal flights. I mean, that kind of nailed it, really. And that's opposition that this government needs. I mean, you know, that budget, if you think about it, and you look at what's happening here this week, it's completely out of kilter with this event. And I think Labour, the front bench, nailed that last week. And I think Keir had a good conference. I know, unfortunate that he wasn't able to respond to the budget. But Labour's got an opportunity on all the points that I was saying before. Big promises have been made to the north of England.
The opinion polls are terrible still. I mean, the Prime Minister's had a mayor over the last month, and they're still leading in the polls.
Well, that's why I think they need to, obviously.
They need a new leader, perhaps.
Well, we've had
Labour.
the pandemic effect, haven't we, where, you know, there's been this cross-party and national unity. But now is the chance to get after a government that I think is failing on its promises. There's a big thing coming, which is around rail investment in the north. And Labour, from the top, needs to hold the government to account for us as northern leaders, because we hear they're about to break a lot of their rail investment promises to the north of England. Well, we'll see, won't we? But these are the opportunities that Labour needs to seize now and hold the government to account.
You're answering like a politician. In other words, you're not answering the question.
Well, the polls aren't great. The question being that Labour needs to do more. Well, definitely, I would agree with that.
Does it need a new leader?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It's got a really strong leader in Keir Starmer. But
how long does he have to prove himself?
Well, I don't think there is you never put a time frame on these things. I think he needs to be given the support now. The party did get behind him at the recent conference. That was clear. It responded well to his speech. It received it well. And now is the chance to really go into opposition proper, because we've not really had that for the last couple of years. And if the polls have to move, let's be honest about that, though, the polls really need to move back in Labour's favour. But I think there's an opportunity here.
And what do you want to achieve while you're here?
We want to be the UK's leading green city region. We're already the UK's leading digital city region. But I want Greater Manchester to lead that next industrial revolution. But the message I'm getting over here, trying to, is let's have climate justice and social justice together. So let's close these gaps in society, give people cheaper public transport that's much better, better homes, create jobs for young people in doing all of that work, narrow some of these divides in society. I think you can level up with the drive to net zero. And, you know, that's my big message. Greater Manchester is ready to go to do all of those things.
Just before I let you go, the C word, COVID, where are we in Greater Manchester? Confident that you won't have another lockdown?
Well, we certainly wouldn't accept any form of local or regional lockdown. The cases have been high. They've fallen a little. They were higher about 2 weeks ago. But still, you know, in mid 600 per 100,000 is, you know, it's a high level of cases in a number of our boroughs. But the hospitalisation is not the same. You know, it's not feeding through into high levels of hospitalisation. They're kind of stable, those figures, at the moment. So we've got a very close watch on it. I'll say it again. I'm sure some of your viewers won't like it. I just believe we should be wearing masks on public transport. Not everywhere, but on public transport. Is it a rule in where I control the system, which is Metrolink, I have said it's a requirement. And now, obviously, with people not required to wear them elsewhere, it's hard to maintain that. But I would say to the government, come on, back us up on this. You know, we've got a difficult winter ahead of us. And the thing is, Kay, you mentioned, what about COVID? Well, it's not just going to be COVID, is it? It's going to be flu. It's going to be all of those seasonal viruses. Flu.
Have you had your jabs?
No, well, I've had my double jab, but I'm waiting for the booster, which I've took 6 months after. Not yet, no, but I'm going to have that at the same time.
OK, see, you're lecturing people and you've not done it yourself.
I'm not lecturing people. I was talking about masks, and I do wear my mask on public transport. But you know, I'm not trying to lecture anybody. I'm just saying we're in a difficult place, aren't we, as a country? We're not out of the pandemic. I know people have been given the impression that we are, but we're not. I just think we need to look at what's coming. Now the clocks have gone back and winter's here, and just be sensible where we need to be, and avoid a lockdown, because that was your first question. We don't want to be back there, do we, this year? OK, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for giving us so much of your time.
No problem. Much appreciated. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, talking to us about a whole range of things here at COP26, wants to lead the country with the next industrial revolution, and that's a green revolution is what he was saying, but he can't do it without direct funding from the government. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be speaking to the Shadow Environment Secretary about the new rules that hopefully the British government have put in place as far as deforestation is concerned, cutting that back in the next decade to improve this planet. I love this. It's such a fantastic image, isn't it? There you go. Hovering above us here at COP26, the Blue Zone. Continuing coverage on Sky.